Hi, I'm Kathy Danneman, and on behalf of Mystery Writers of America, welcome to the 77th Annual Edgar Awards Symposium. Tonight's discussion is with the nominees for the Simon & Schuster Mary Higgins Clark Award. Our moderator is Sara J. Henry, and our bookseller is Mysterious Galaxy in San Diego. You can learn more about the Edgar Awards by following us on social media using the hashtag Edgars2023 or by visiting the websites mysterywriters.org or edgarawards.com. The Edgar Awards will be live streamed on our YouTube channel on April 27th. During tonight's discussion, I will be posting links to our panelists' books in the chat, and please feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box throughout the conversation, and we will answer them toward the end of the hour. Sara J. Henry is the author of Learning to Swim, which won the Mary Higgins Clark Award and the Anthony Award and Agatha Award for Best First Novel, and its follow-up, A Cold and Lonely Place. And an Agatha Award for Best First Novel and its follow-up. Apologies, everyone. Apologies, Sarah. She has been a newspaper, magazine, and book editor and lives in rural Vermont with her son and multiple dogs and cats. Thank you. And Sarah, if you'll just take it away.
Okay, this is going to be so much fun. I'm sorry, the screen just changed and it threw me. I'm looking at something else altogether there. Okay, we're going to do this alphabetically, and I think I sent you guys at the very last minute. I apologize, I've been ill, and hopefully my voice holds up for this. I'm going to start with something you guys probably all know, but perhaps the people watching don't. Or the criteria for this it's a Mary Higgins Clark Award, and it is for and this was fascinating because these criteria, you sort of have to these days, you wobble a little bit because it's hard to find something that exactly matches. The protagonist is a nice young woman whose life is suddenly invaded, and trust me, you have a lot of discussions about what young entails and what nice entails. She's self-made and independent with primarily good family relationships. Interesting job, not looking for trouble, solves her problem by her own courage and intelligence, no unseen violence, and again, no horrible violence, and no strong four-letter words or explicit sex scenes. So with that, I'm going to just quickly, although actually I realize people can see the names of and I was going to just mention everyone's name in their book, but I realized people can see that and I don't need that. So we're going to start with, Amanda Flower, because that's alphabetically. And I'm going to read her bio. I can't see Amanda right now, so let me just adjust this so I can. There she is. All right. Hi, Amanda. It's so good to meet you.
It was nice to meet you too, Sarah.
Best-selling and Agatha Award-winning author of over 45 mystery novels. Sorry. They received star reviews from Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, and Romantic Times, and she has been featured in USA Today, First for Women and Women's World. She currently writes for Penguin Random House, Berkeley, Kensington, and Source Books. In addition to being a writer, yes, she was a librarian for 15 years. Today, Flower and her husband own a farm and recording studio, and they live in Northeast Ohio. And yes, I actually have the books in order here. So
thank you.
I'm going to read just a tiny passage and then ask you to. I picked these passages not quite at random, but this is just one from chapter 1. As the wagon rolled by on a fast clip, one of its rear wooden wheels fell into a rut in the road and splashed mud onto my side. I stopped in the rain and stared at my soiled skirts and cloak. My head hung low. Was there any purpose in going to the interview now? Miss O'Brien would never hire me to be a maid when I arrived in such a state. How could I claim to be able to clean anything when I was a mess? I watched as the wagon lumbered down the mud-covered street. The rain fell in earnest then, so much that I couldn't even see the stately homes that sat on either side of the street or the two-story brick primary school I attended off and on as a child. I yanked at the hood of my cloak, pulling it farther down over my eyes. I couldn't turn back. It would be far worse to show up late than dirty. I marched ahead in soggy boots. I want to read more, but I know we have so many books to go through. You start reading and you want to keep going. One of the questions I have, and this was something I thought of at the very last minute, is the names of all the characters. And let me start with the question of your main character is Willa Noble. Tell us just very briefly about your book and who Willa is.
My book is Because I Could Not Stop for Death, and it is the first in the series of the Emily Dickinson mystery series. And I pitched the idea to my agent of using Emily Dickinson as a character, and she loved it. And then I was like, oh no, I can't write as Emily Dickinson because she's a genius, and she thinks different than I do as a mystery author. So I was thinking of ways to have kind of a Watson to her Sherlock. So that's how Willa came to be. And so she is a new maid in the Dickinson home that Emily actually decides to hire, even though she's a complete mess, because there's something about her that Emily connects with. And she's a very kind person who works hard, wants a good life for her and her brother, but she has kind of a dark past in her family history and things like that that she's trying to avoid. So Emily, her brother, unfortunately, is the one that's murdered in the book, and Emily decides that they should find out what happened to him. Will is a little bit reluctant, but Emily is a very determined woman, and so they go forth and try to solve this murder that happens in 1850, Amherst, Massachusetts.
Her name, how did you select? I love to find out how people name their characters.
So I was really inspired of my 19th century American literature, as some of my other work has been involved with that as well. So she's named after Willa Cather, and then Noble, just because she's a noble person. I don't think I consciously thought that when I named her, because I was like, oh, that sounds good. And then I was like, as she was becoming more real, I was like, oh, that's kind of on the nose, but I still like it. So that's kind of how her name came to be.
I love the name, and I love the idea that Emily is not the main character. You have, then that was, as reading it first, we're like, who's the main character?
Right. Right.
Is Willa, and it's a nice device, and it was a fascinating book. Has anything surprised you about the reception of the book, or what people think of it, or people's reactions?
Well,
pleased you or upset you?
Yeah, no, I think the reception's been wonderful. I think what's most surprised me is this nomination from Mystery Writers America and from Simon and Schuster. When I got it, I just started crying, because it did not, like, this is not something I would ever anticipate ever happening to me, even though I've been doing this a pretty long time now. And so I'm just so grateful. So that was wonderful. And just how I'm able to like really show what Emily was like before she was a recluse. Like, people just envision her as this woman in white, and that really didn't happen until the beginning of the Civil War. So in her 20s, she did go to Washington, D.C., like the book describes, and stop in Philadelphia on the way home. She was active and out in society. Gentlemen were calling on her, whether or not she was receptive. So things were happening in her life. So as she got deeper into her poetry and some tragedy happens, I think that's why she pulled away.
That's fascinating. And it's also, one of my questions was going to be like, how did you feel? Were you surprised when you found out? And were you surprised into that category? Why were you so surprised?
I was so surprised because when I like to say I was a baby author years and years ago, someone gave me a Christmas ornament with a bunch of like those bead letters in it, and I hang it on my tree every year, and it's like, something like a Edgar nominated novel, some assembly required. So I hang it on my tree. I got it in my 20s, like when I started this adventure, and I just can't believe it happened. Like, and I found out from a reader, so I didn't really, like, someone I don't know messaged me on Facebook, and I was like, meh, like, are you sure? So I went and checked and rechecked, and then called my agent, my husband, and I was crying. So yeah, I was absolutely shocked. But once you went over the criteria, I was like, well, that's the kind of books that I write. but I still I'm still so excited. I'm just
Oh, wow.
can't
Gives me
believe I'm
chills.
going to New York. I'm a farmer going to New York. I'm so excited.
And we're all going to dress up.
I know, I have a dress already.
That's the fun part. Yes, that's so lovely. Yeah, it was obviously a wonderful book, and we
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed reading it, but I'm like surprised that you were surprised because it's a great book.
Oh, thank you.
Quick questions. Let's see. What could you name a book or two or an author or two that possibly informed your development as a writer or inspired you?
So I've always been really so there's two sides. One in the mystery side for historical mystery, Elizabeth Peters for sure, adore her work. And then because my academic study has been 19th century transcendentalist writers in New England, Emily was not a transcendentalist, but she was a contemporary. So like Emerson, Thoreau, Alcott, Bronson Alcott, Louise Amelia Alcott's father, all those people I kind of nerdy about. So to be able to have my love of mystery and 19th century literature collide in this novel is kind of unbelievable. And I'm so grateful I got to write it. I thank my editor all the time. I'm like, thank you so much.
Well, real quickly, what's next? What's coming out next for you, or what are you working on now?
So right now, my next book coming out, I also write cozy mysteries. So my next book coming out in June is Blueberry Blunder. It's an Amish candy shop mystery. It's like book 8 in the series. And I will always write cozy as well as historical because I love them. They're fun. They're a nice escape. And then the next Emily Dickinson book comes out in November. It's called I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. And Emerson makes an appearance in that. So that's fun for me, my nerdy self. But right now I'm writing what will be the first mystery in a Catherine Wright mystery series. And she's the younger sister of Orville and Wilbur Wright. And she kind of was like their social calendar. And she did ran the bicycle shop while they were in Kitty Hawk trying to learn how to fly. So it starts in 1903 when she gets the telegram that says that they flew for 57 seconds for the first time on December 17th. So I'm really excited about it. And that's set here in Ohio. So I've been over to Dayton a lot doing research.
Sound exciting. Goodness, I could spend an hour talking to each one of you, but I'm going to have to move
Yeah,
on.
thank you.
Thank you so much. What's next? And let's see if I remember. Make sure I pronounce this right. I believe it's Sulari Gentill. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Right.
All right. And thank you for joining us from Australia, correct?
Yes, absolute pleasure.
It's so good to see you. And let's see, read your bio. Is multi-award winning author of the USA Today bestselling The Woman in the Library, as well as the Rowland Sinclair Mysteries, the Hero Trilogy, and After She Wrote Him. I said, I love that title, for which she won 2018 Ned Kelly Award. Sulari lives with her husband, Michael, and their boys, Edmund and Atticus. Ooh, I love the names. On a small farm in the foothills of the snowy mountains of Australia, where she grows French black truffles, keeps donkeys, and writes about murder and mayhem. In your book, can you briefly, this was such a twisty plot, not just plot, but the way you threaded it together. So can you briefly describe your book? I don't know if it's
Well, yeah.
And I did have a
Briefly,
message to read, but yeah,
I'll have to go. It's actually a novel within a novel, or a novel woven into a conversation. The book opens with a letter. The letter is written to dear Hannah, and it's from a man called Leo, who is in Boston. And Hannah is an Australian writer of some renown, and he is a fan who happens to be living in Boston. And he is, in the beginning, everything anyone could want from a fan and a correspondent. He's supportive, he loves her work, he's charming. But as the novel progresses and you see more letters from Leo, and you see a letter from Leo at the end of every chapter, you start to realize that there's something quite dark about Leo. For one thing, he seems to know an awful lot about murder. And the other part of the book is the story that Hannah is writing in response to the advice that she gets from Leo. And her novel is set in Boston, and it centers around a young woman called Winifred Kincaid, and Freddie to her friends. And Freddie's in Boston to write her very worthy first novel under the auspice of a very prestigious fellowship. And so she happens to be in the Boston Public Library, trying to write, but basically staring at the ceiling and looking around at everybody around her and mind doodling, when a terrible, horrified scream rings out through the library. And everybody stops everything they're doing because they know that something terrible has happened. But when an investigation is conducted, nobody is found. There's nothing. But of course, this is a mystery, so there is. So that's basically the premise of the story. It looks at Winifred happens to be sitting when the scream rings out at a table with three other people, three strangers. They each have their own reasons for being in the library, but it was the scream that actually bonded them, that got them speaking. They might have been ships in the night passing through and never ever thought to speak to each other, except that they happened to be sitting at the same table when someone screamed.
That's a great setup. And I'm just curious, did you have that set up in mind all along? Were you always going to start the novel that way?
Yeah, look, the interesting thing about that novel was I was writing another novel when the idea for this one came up, as often happens. And I wanted to write a novel set in Boston, and I was doing that with the Rowell and Sinclair series. But I'd never been to Boston at the time, so I didn't want to write it badly. But I had a dear friend who is an American writer who happened to be in Boston at the time. So I wrote to Larry and I said, do you mind if I pick your brain while you're in Boston? And he said, sure, no problems. I'll whatever you need, I'll do it. And that, started wonderfully. But Larry is a better researcher than I am. Mm. And so not only would he answer my questions, he'd send me maps and weather reports, news items, and then one day there was a murder a few blocks from where Larry was staying, and he thought, Sulari's a mystery writer, she might be interested in what an American crime scene looks like. So he took himself off down there and took footage of this crime scene. The body had been removed, and he sent it to me. And so I'm in Australia. I opened the email, and it's a crime scene, footage of a crime scene. My husband happened to be standing behind me, and he said, gee, I hope Larry's not killing people to send you research. And that was the genesis of this story. Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's amazing. I'm going to read a very, very, let's see, I don't realize I don't have great lighting in here. Yes, a quick passage. And this is actually the beginning of the book. Writing in the Boston Public Library had been a mistake. It was too magnificent. One could spend hours just staring at the ceiling in the reading room. Very few books have been written with the writer's eyes cast upwards. It judged you, that ceiling, looked down on you in every way, mocked you with an architectural perfection that couldn't be achieved by simply placing one word after another until a structure took shape. It made you want to start with grand arcs to build a magnificent framework into which the artistic detail would be written, a thing of vision and symmetry and cohesion. But that, sadly, isn't the way I write. Again, I want to keep reading. As I read this passage over this morning, I thought the library is almost like another character in your book. And I don't know if that was intentional. It's funny, we have a librarian in our midst. Amanda's like,
well, I think because this was a story within a story folded into a correspondence, it felt natural that it start in a library, which is where stories are held and guarded and championed. So it just seemed to be a natural place for this story to evolve.
As a writer and a reader, and of course a lover of books, I mean, of course we're all drawn in because it's a library, and it's a
library. Yeah.
Yes, it's such a great beginning. I have to look at my questions here. I get carried away on all these books. Has anything surprised you about how this book resonated with people, or how they interpret it, or anything about it?
Look, it always surprises me because, as writers, we write on our own in solitary, and we sort of creating something into an abyss. We have no idea how people will respond. So for me, and I never think about when I'm writing, I'm not thinking about, what will the reader think of this or what will the reader think of that. I'm just creating the story as it evolves. And so it always surprises me when the book goes out there that there's other people that talk to it and understand it and relate to it. Because a little part of myself is always afraid that it's just me. It's just me being entertained by my
and maybe
words.
your editor, publisher, maybe they're all wrong, right?
Exactly. So yeah, so in a way, the reception of The Woman in the Library has always surprised me, and I thought and delighted me. And it's been one of those books that not universally loved or understood. It's one of those books that starts conversations and starts people fighting about what it meant and how it worked out, and I quite like that.
Yeah, because there's so many twists and turns are the wrong words, but it's layers. There's a lot of layers, I would say. And I will say the 5 books we have here are all so wonderful and also different. And you should all read them if you haven't, because they are really good. How did you choose your main character's name?
I have a preference for female names that can have male nicknames.
Okay.
So and that's always been the way with all my books. Everybody's always had a male nickname, and it's just a thing. I just like it. It's not it's not meant to mean anything or anything of the sort. So in the Roland Sinclair series, the primary female lead was named Edna, and everyone called her Ed. And in previous books there have been Geraldines that have gone to Jerry and so on. So I always start with a male name that I would like a character to be called, and then find the feminine to this backwards. So
fascinating. This is the last question that occurred to me as I was compiling my notes, and I'm so glad I asked it, because these are fascinating answers. And now you can't deviate from this, now you have to keep this up. This is wonderful.
Yes. So I started with Freddie, and I looked for all the female names that could be shortened to Freddie, and Winifred came up.
And so if you grow up as a Winifred, that's, it's going to inform you.
Exactly. So it was that for me. And then the male lead, Kane, he has a reason for taking that name, because that's his writer's name. And so that all sort of kind of fits in and falls in. But I actually find naming characters very difficult, because if you don't get the right name, it doesn't seem to work for me. I
imagine so. And then I imagine we all do that. You Google the person to make sure there's not a famous person with that name, or
no, my editor does that and informs me when I do that. So I have had to change some names.
I would do it early on, just because you don't want, I get things fixed in my head. I would hate to change it. What books inspired you or informed your development as a writer? Can you name one or two?
Look, easily. To Kill a Mockingbird. It was the reason I became a lawyer. It was the reason I became a writer. I still love it.
Atticus.
And I have a son named Atticus. So that gives you an indication of how much I love that book. Look, there's so many books that I love, but To Kill a Mockingbird is something that, I think I only read it once. I'm not one of these people that read books over and over and over again, but there's still passages that I can remember, I can recite, because they're so beautiful and they're so wonderfully done. And you were so moved by them. So there's, To Kill a Mockingbird. I also have I love Oscar Wilde's plays. I have a thing for Shakespeare, which sounds all bizarre for a mystery writer, but a lot of stories, even though they're not classified as mysteries, circle around a mystery.
Oh, okay. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'm in this group that says every story is a mystery.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I love, a crime usually the book is not really about the crime. The crime is the stage upon which you get to, brings out characteristics. It brings out people. You get to watch people react. What is next for you? What are you working on now, or do you have something coming out soon?
I have a book coming out next year called The Mystery Writer.
Oh.
And I'm working on a book. I toured the US last year, and on the tail end of that, I went to Europe and rode the Orient Express from Paris to Vienna. And then it occurred to me that there is another story there in the Orient Express. So that's what I'm working on now.
How exciting. Again, I really wish I had an hour with everybody, and I'm just going to show you the book again, and then we're going to jump over to Carol and the disinvited guest. And shuffle my paperwork here. Carol Goodman is the author of 24 novels, including The Lake of Dead Language and The Seduction of Water, which won the 2003 Hammett Prize, The Widow's House, which won you've been here before, the 2018 Mary Higgins Clark Award, and The Night Visitors, which won 2020 Mary Higgins Clark Award. Girl.
Yes.
I'm like, did I read that right?
Yes, no, that's it. I know. I can't believe it myself.
Oh, you're like, oh gosh, here comes another award. Ho ho.
Not really.
Sorry, I thought, how you think you read the wrong line. I'm like,
Right.
I knew you've been nominated before one, but I missed this one. She
Maybe I
lives
should be here.
in the Hudson Valley with her family and teaches literature and writing at the New School in SUNY New Paltz. And her book is The Disinvited Guest. And let's see, I think I have a passage selected here. And these are a little bit just passages that just jumped out at me. And her main character is named Lucy. So someone is asking her, who were you worried about, Lucy? Before I can answer, the pier shakes and we both turn to see what's barreling out of the fog toward us. As a dark hooded shape wielding a crooked staff emerges, I catch my breath. It looks like those cartoons of the Grim Reaper that were so popular 10 years ago during the 2020 pandemic. I remember one carrying a carton of toilet paper, another wearing a mask, but it's only Mac. The hood of his slicker up, carrying a loading hook. "You better be going," he says, before the tide goes out without us. I let my breath out, along with the idea that has seized me, that the death I'd avoided 10 years ago has been waiting here for me all along. I picked a good passage there, right? That's like, whoa, that's a hook. That's a hook if I ever saw one.
Literally a hook, right?
Oh, didn't actually even say that, yes. So
Yeah.
tell us a wee bit about your book.
Okay, we bit The Disinvited Guest, which is from that passage, you can tell it is set during a pandemic, but not the one that we just experienced. It's set 10 years from then in the future, in a future pandemic. And this happened because during the pandemic, I was writing one book. And as I imagine a lot of writers had that experience of they're writing a contemporary novel, and all of a sudden their contemporary novel has become a historical novel because the world has changed so abruptly that if you really want to set it in, right up in the present, is looking very different. I also read at the time in the New York Times, there was an article that said, now is not the time to write your pandemic novel. And I really don't like being told what to do. So in an ordinary way, I was like, I think I'm going to write a pandemic novel. And I don't know where the idea came that it would be. I think the idea came that I wanted it not to be about our present. What I was doing all of a sudden when I was teaching at SUNY New Paltz is my classes had gone remote. And so I was staring into a Zoom screen with all my very confused and sad looking college students who had just had their lives disrupted. And I found myself thinking, what are their lives going to be like after this? How is this going to shape their lives? And so I thought about 10 years from now, how would this have shaped their lives? And what if there was another one? So I wanted to write about a group of people who, during a pandemic, flee from the world of masks and contagion and go to an island off the coast of Maine, someplace where they feel that they'll be safe. And as often happens when people are seeking safety, they find just the opposite. So they go to this beautiful island. Oh, and the other thing is that in 2019, I had spent the summer at a writer's retreat on an island off the coast of Maine. And I was thinking a lot about that place. So Lucy Harper and her husband, her best friend from college, her husband's sister, and her wife, and one person, Mac, who is the kind of the caretaker of the island. They go off to this island with provisions. Their plan is to stay there and be safe and weather the pandemic. And things start to happen. Bad things start to happen.
They do.
Things get as they do on an island off the coast of Maine.
During the pandemic, of course they do.
and part of the problem is that the island has this really interesting history, kind of a dark history. It was a fever island. It was one of the islands during the Irish, I see all my historians nodding their head, during the potato famine, where ships coming from Ireland stopped. There were a couple of those islands, one on the St. Lawrence River, but one at the mouth off the coast of Maine, a little north of where the island I had actually stayed in. So it has this history, and Lucy she finds a journal of a doctor who was there when it was a fever island. So we get sort of a story within a story of what happened back then in 1848 is when that it had been a fever island, and also what happened 10 years previous when Lucy's husband, his family had stayed at this island during the pandemic, and several people had died. So there are a couple of mysteries in the past to solve, and then things start disappearing, and eventually one of the people does die, and we have to figure out why.
So again, a lot of layers. We don't have in a single simple novel here, which is delightful.
I don't know what those are. I always, whenever when I'm at the end of a novel, which is finishing up a novel right now, and I always say to myself, next one, simple. and I never do. It never works out that way, but I swear each time that I'm going to write, the next one's going to be simpler.
One of these days. Has anything surprised or disheartened you or made you really happy about how this book has been received by people?
Well, I did not know, even though I was ornery about writing the pandemic novel, I did not know how people would respond to that, or if people would be interested in reading something set in a pandemic. And I think the fact that it was a slightly future pandemic eased some people into it. And because it doesn't really dwell on exactly what was, what we just went through, even though there's that reference to toilet paper and masks. And also I've found, there are a number of books set during our pandemic that I've read that I've been really interested and loved. So I've been happy that didn't seem to completely dissuade people. And so I've been really delighted by, a lot of the responses to the book, most especially, I dedicated the book to Steve Dunn, who was the man who ran the artist colony that I was at on Norton Island in 2019. And sadly, Steve died the year after that. And so by dedicating it to him, a number of people who stay at the island and residents, there's a copy of it there on the island, and people have read it and gotten in touch with me about how felt reading the book while on the island. And Steve's widow, Rosemary, has said some wonderful things about the book to me. So that's been really, on a personal level, really touching for me.
What a really nice connection. I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody about their character name. Now, your character is.
I know. I was thinking, I don't have a great story. I don't have the Willa Cather or the male name. I'm jealous of everyone else. I was thinking, it's my 24th book. And it's like, okay, I've got to find a name I haven't used before. That's a challenge.
Lucy Harper.
Lucy Harper. And I had actually, Lucy was never been a narrator, but she was a character. There was a Lucy in my very first book. I thought, okay, I can get away with that. And Harper's actually her husband's name, which is unusual for me to have a character who's taken her husband's name, but I needed an old Maine name. I needed a name that, because it goes, it's her husband's family was the name of the doctor who had been there in 1848 as a Harper. And I thought Harper, I guess I was thinking about harpoons and harp seals and Harpwell, Maine, and that's the sum total of the intellectual thinking I was doing about that name.
And I mean, obviously a Lucy is going to grow up very different than a Winifred. So in itself, it's yeah. So, okay. I realized I had natural light in the room and now it's getting dark. So I'm really having to
I was wondering if it was my eyes or
I'm in Vermont and I guess the sun is going down and I didn't think ahead. Oh, I will need more light in here. So we will just wing it here. Oh, what books informed your development as a writer? If you know.
So I was thinking about that. I mean, my immediate answer is always Jane Eyre, because it's the book I read when I was 13 and just I loved and read, and I've read it over many times. And then I was thinking of the line through Jane Eyre, Daphne du Maurier, Mary Stuart, and Mary Higgins Clark. And I was thinking, romantic suspense, since you had also asked about were you surprised about, being nominated for this award? And I think
you're like, oh, yet again.
Hardly. I was actually shocked because, again. But the first time actually I was nominated, to answer that question, I was really surprised because I hadn't thought about my books in that context. But then I was like, oh yeah, you did spend the 80s reading all of Mary Higgins Clark. And there's a tradition of romantic suspense and books about women in peril, and I think that really goes back to Mary Stuart's one of my favorites, and Daphne du Maurier, and goes back to Jane Eyre. So that's the line I think of.
That's personally fascinating. Jane Eyre was probably my very first too, and I was probably, I think, 11 when I read it, and then I just devoured the Mary Stuart's Nine Coaches Waiting. I mean, I can quote from that book.
Magic.
It's so good at just suspense and characters, and I pity anyone who hasn't discovered those books yet, because
I envy them. They get to read them again.
This is true. Yeah, and again, they're just, and a lot of people who say Mary Stuart and they think the Arthur books, which I've never read. I'm like, no, the romantic.
I read those too. Actually, I read those when I was pretty young, but I
didn't. I think I was just so set on reading the ones like the ones I'd read. What is next for you?
So my next book is called The Bones of the Story, and it's set on a college campus. The main character, Nell Portman, is the dean of liberal arts, and so she has to. We start out with her. It's post-pandemic, so she's dealing with all students who are all their lives have been upended, but they're coming out of it, and she's also preparing for a reunion of people that she went to school with at this school, and they get stranded on a campus in a snowstorm, and bad things happen.
Okay, I can't wait to read that one too. So now we are over to B.R. Myers, Bethany, and I did ask people in advance how they wanted what they wanted to be called, and A Dreadful Splendor. And I have a passage that I really hope I can see to read. Let's see. I may have to use I'm just going to pull out my phone and use my flashlight on this. Nothing like improvising. We can pretend I'm on an island with no light, I guess.
Appropriate for a mystery panel.
Yes, it's looking very spooky there.
Oh, and rats. I think my thing. I had a really great passage I wanted to read. I am going to put that off for just a second, and then I will actually turn the light on and try to find that passage again. And let me just read your bio. Can't believe I didn't think about, this room's going to get dark. There's my bio. Sorry, people. I don't have that many pieces of paper here, and how could I possibly lost that one? But here we go. Jumped over the computer, and the room's getting dark. The author of 9 young adult novels, including Girl on the Run and Rogue Princess. When she's not putting her characters in precarious situations, she works as a registered nurse a member of Writers Federation of Nova Scotia. She lives in Halifax, Canada with her family. A Dreadful Splendor is her first adult novel. And that's pretty exciting to have, I would assume. Now, were you surprised to hear about the Mary Higgins Clark? You might not have ever heard of it, being Canadian, but how did you feel when you were?
I was astonished when I got the email from my editor, and then another one came from my agent, and then another one was coming, and I was like, what is going on? And I had heard of the Edgars, but I hadn't heard specifically about this award. So I was gobsmacked for the day. I did have that moment of, is this real? Is this right? This is a joke. It's really me. But it's been really exciting. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be included with this group, and I'm really looking forward to meeting most of you next week. So Sulari and I actually have the same agent, so it was
Jill.
Jill, yeah, it's kind of an interesting connection, yeah.
Can you, I'm going to actually, after I ask you this question, I'm going to go turn on my lights, because this is becoming ridiculous. I thought of everything, but apparently not. The sun goes down this time. Everyone now knows when the sun goes down in Vermont. Just briefly describe your book and heroine while I slip out of frame here and go turn on lights.
Okay. So Genevieve Timmons is the main character, and she is a fake spiritualist, a con artist, and it's the mid 1800s in London, and the only way she can make her living, she's not particularly enjoying that, but she's a survivor. It's what she has to do, and she ends up doing a seance for the wrong family, and was set up and ends up getting caught by the police. So while she's in the police office, she's rescued actually by someone who works for a nobleman, a lord whose bride died 6 months before that. So he hires her, he helps her out of jail, and he hires her to go to the isolated estate to put on a show, put on one of her fake seances, because the fiance is so upset with the death of his bride that they think that this will help give him peace. She thinks this is a pretty great deal. She gets out of jail. She'll get a little money on the side. It'll be an easy job for her. Once she does arrive to the mansion, she finds out that the fiance is not exactly the brokenhearted widower that she was led to believe, and he feels that his bride was murdered. So he actually comes up with an idea to employ Genevieve to help him figure out who the murderer is by staging a seance so convincing that the murderer confesses. So while she's there, she now is put in the position of having to be a detective and going through the house and the different suspects, from the ward to the housekeeper to the maid to, the shifty-eyed butler. So everyone could be a suspect. So she has to figure out who she thinks may have had a hand in the bride's murder, so she knows who to target at the seance. But then things start to happen in the house, and this woman who's, a fake spiritualist soon discovers that maybe ghosts are real. And there's a haunting in the house, and she has to figure out really quickly what that means for her. So,
talk about a layered plot. There's a lot going on here. And I really wish I could find the passage I wanted to read, but if we have time, I'll come back to it. I'll find it as we go on. So I realize now I should have used the sticky tape and not the thing that I pulled out. How did you feel? I mean, I assume you were surprised about the nomination, yes. And then
oh yeah, very surprised.
This is great. And how did you build and develop this particular heroine, and maybe discuss her name too?
Well, for all of my books, even my YA books, they always come to me in the idea of a scene, and a particular scene that just I keep thinking about and keep playing over in my mind, and then I ask myself a lot of questions. Is this the beginning of a story? Is it the middle? Is it the end? Whose story is it? What's the point of view? So this scene for this particular book is a scene that takes close to the end. It's the seance. And I remember thinking, wouldn't it be really neat, you know, someone's doing this seance, but it's all going to be fake, but then the real ghost shows up. So that was sort of the idea that started this. And I knew that my main character was going to be the spiritualist. So she had to be someone who had a bit of a tragic past, but you know, but is street smart because she's a con artist. You know, but she's a loner as well. She's a survivor, but she's also has to be someone who's a bit of a chameleon because she goes into these homes of the elite, of the noble class, and she has to slip into that position with them and in order to gain their trust, in order to convince them. So she had a lot of layers. And for her name, actually for the name of all of my characters, I just steal from real life. So I from the obituaries, I read the obituaries every day. So sometimes I get names from there. When I'm going to the grocery store, if you know, sometimes if they have their name tag on, so it's really weird. I just remember people, you know, if someone helps me with the cash, sometimes their name gets put in a book. So yeah, and then I do actually do a little bit of research just to make sure that the name that I'm using, you know, makes sense for that time.
Yeah, I did find the passage, and we're running a little short on time, so I'll read it very quickly because I just love the last sentence of this. Let's see, my instinct had been always to do what would ever fetch the most profit, but in this case, the reward would be having my day in court to absolve the charges against me. A long shot, I admit. However, Mr. Pemberton was offering neither money nor help. Instead, he was holding the threat of having me arrested for my attempted theft of the candlesticks. And I love this next little short paragraph. It was a perplexing conflict. Luckily, I had a delicious meal to keep me occupied while I figured it out. And she's a very sensible woman. It's like, food, this is great.
She's enjoying the food there, that's for sure.
Can you briefly, because again, I've enjoyed this so much, but we are running a little short on time and I need to get to Donna's book. What writers might have influenced you as you were beginning your career or?
Well, everything I read, you know, I try and learn a little bit of something from, but for this book in particular, there's three of my favorite novels that I really wanted to take my favorite things from. So Pride and Prejudice for the slow bird romance, The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Luis Sevron for the Gothic elements, and The Fingersmith by Sarah Waters for the
I stumbled across that book and I was like mesmerized.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
she's one of my favorites. So.
Fantastic. And what is your next book, or do you know yet?
Yeah, so the one I'm working on now is sort of in the same vein. It's a ghost story, early 1800s, but it takes place in Nova Scotia, and it's actually loosely inspired by the Oak Island mystery. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with that.
We will be. We'll look it up as soon as this is over. Okay, I'm going to jump over to D.M. Rowell and her Never Name the Dead, which I have a copy here. And as I learned in advance, her name is, she goes by Donna, so we're using that. I'm not going to try to pronounce your Kiowa name. I'm going to let you do that, Donna. But Donna, like her protagonist Mud, comes from a long line of Kiowa storytellers within a Plains Indian culture that treasures oral traditions. After a 32-year career spinning stories for Silicon Valley startups and corporations, with a few escapes creating award-winning independent documentaries, Rowell started a new chapter writing the Mud Sawpole Mysteries, featuring a Silicon Valley professional Kiowa woman solving thefts to murders in Kiowa country. And this is the first in that series, and it is her debut novel, which I think is personally pretty cool.
It's amazing.
And I've seen Donna at a conference recently, so I'm pretty sure that you were surprised by your nomination.
Knocked over. Yes. Yes. In fact, another author actually told me, you do realize how prestigious this is, don't you? Go, what do you mean? It's a wonderful author. I've always read her, but no, I had no idea. And it just knocked me over. It was wonderful.
So great. And has anything surprised you about how your book has been received or how people have reacted to it?
Yeah, I've been really pleasantly surprised at how much of the Kiowa culture, my Native American tribe is the Kiowas. And I weave a lot of that into my murder mystery. The setting is Kiowa country, and a lot of the culture and aspects of the mystery is involved with the culture itself. And I've been doing book clubs, and it's wonderful to hear that I didn't inundate too much Kiowa culture, just enough to keep people interested and still love the mystery enough to continue reading throughout the book. So I love that there's an interest there.
You did a great job of weaving it throughout the book, and that may be what pulled people in. This passage I was going to read just real quickly. And I'm not going to try to pronounce the Kiowa words, but this was really not a good time for me to leave. But Grandpa had called his message, granddaughter, in Kiowa words that I'm not going to. I have a bad feeling, come now, worried me, but it had been Grandpa's voice that tugged at me. He sounded wrong, out of balance. Since then, I had not been able to reach him. I'd left a message telling him I had the earliest flight out. I was coming. I didn't want to, but I was coming. And she goes on to talk about her medicine bundle. All these years away from the reservation, our traditions, yet I kept the bundle close to me as it held the medicine necessary to enrich my spirit, as my traditional Kiowa grandfather insisted. And I think that gives a glimmering of an idea of what this book is about and what it pulls from. How did you select the character's name?
Since my father is Kiowa, and it's the family that I'm closest to in growing up, and so it's inundated with a lot of my father's culture, and I wanted to make sure to honor my mother's side of the family. So May is actually my mother's middle name, and I brought that in. My main character has two names. She's May in Silicon Valley, May Sawpole. But when she returns to what had been the reservation and the traditions, they know her in that community as Mud. And I got the name Mud because my mother's mother, my grandmother on my mother's side, when I was a little girl, probably 8, 9 years old, I can remember my grandmother sitting and talking with her two other sisters, my great aunt Pearl and great aunt Goldie. And my great aunt Goldie turns and calls my grandmother Mud. And it just tickled me pink. My grandma's nickname growing up was Mud. So I used May and Mud for my main character, just to honor both that side of the family as well as what I do for the Kiowa side of my family.
That's fascinating. And how did you build your heroine? I think you've based it a lot on, people, your own life, right? Yeah.
My own life a lot. Yes, quite a bit. I'm so lucky. I grew up with storytellers in my life. My grandfather is the historian, or was the historian of our tribe. So I grew up with stories of my tribe forever. And so I used that to weave into where I wanted my story to go. I knew I wanted to honor that history and share the Kiowa culture, since we are a vanishing tribe. And I splatter in some of the Kiowa expressions throughout the book purposely, just to try and keep the language alive. They tend to be expressions that I would hear as a child growing up in everyday life. And so those were the common terms that I try to use in the book quite a bit and going through there.
And I've heard you talk about this on a panel, so I know some of the answers. What books informed your development as a writer?
Well, I first start with the oral traditions, having my grandfather as a master storyteller and telling through the evenings. Grandpa would roll out this calendar and he would choose a selection through about 100-year history and then tell us a story from our history. So the rhythm of a story definitely was influenced from my grandfather. And then I was a Trixie Belden girl. I love mysteries from the moment I could read. So for me, I have the ideal book I'm bringing in and teaching people about my Kiowa culture, and I get to be a Trixie Belden girl at the same time and have a murder mystery to solve.
Now, did we get enough of? I think we did. Did we get enough of a description of your book in?
I think so, through our discussion, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I'm trying to figure out, I know we have 5 minutes. Do we need to, I haven't been alerted, so I guess we can keep talking until I'm told we can do more. What is next for you, Donna?
I finished book 2. I'm got it with my editor now. Silent Are the Dead. It's I see this is a 4-book series initially and going further from there, but the first 4 books is for a 4-day, because when I'm trying to bring my main character, May Mudd, through a spiritual quest. So it's a 4-day vision quest that she's going through. A murder a day, sometimes an old one by the time I get there. But she's going to have 2 mysteries set in Kiowa country in Oklahoma. Then she returns to Silicon Valley in the 3rd book, which I'm writing right now. And then in the 4th book, which is the 4th day of her quest, she returns to Kiowa country and resolves her spiritual quest at that point and finds a way to bring her 2 worlds together, as well as become a happy person in life.
When I saw you at a panel recently, what I loved is you had actually brought the jawbone of
was inspired by my murder weapon is a buffalo jawbone. I was inspired by one my grandpa made when he was a kid. Well, it's probably 100 and something years old. He gave it to me. I don't have it in front of me, but I'll give you. I have a blank one I've been planning on painting. So this was my murder weapon. It's a buffalo jawbone, and it's a head knocker. This is what was, one of the first weapons that the tribe would have, is a head knocker. You would get small animals and sneak up and take them out with a jawbone. So that was my murder weapon, my buffalo jawbone. I think it might be one of the first murder mysteries out there with the buffalo jawbone as a weapon.
I don't think most of us realized how big it was and powerful. So I think we're close to ending here. So I don't know if we're going to go into any questions, or if we, I'm kind of waiting to be told. Do we have questions? Okay, we don't have any questions. So we've already done next projects. What I don't think we have any very, very quick things to cover. So we can, is there anyone, I don't know if you can put up your hands if there's anything we haven't covered that we need to cover. Donna, do you have anything else that we've left out?
No, I feel so honored to be just aligned with Mary Higgins Clark, my name associated with it, and with all of you four. I'm honored. I look forward to seeing and meeting you all in New York. Wish you were there, and I hope we do meet sometime soon. But thank you. I'm excited.
Okay, I'm going to, I'll see, I've got a little thing to read about. Oh, the next thing coming up is join us Saturday, April 22nd at 1 p.m. for a conversation with the nominees for the Lillian Jackson Braun Memorial Award. And you can learn more about the Edgar Awards by following us on social media using the Edgars 2023 hashtag, or by visiting the website, which is mysterywriters.org and edgarawards.com. Ladies, I wish we had 2 hours. I mean, I really do. This is just so fascinating. And I just want to talk more and more about the, your writing careers and these amazing books. And thank you so much for your time and being here. And I will see most of you, except for Sulari, at the Edgars. And this is just going to be great. Wow.
I'll be with you in spirit.
Yes.
Yes, I know you. And I really think we need to make a little cardboard cutout of you that, we will work on that. So
thank you so much,
I'm loving the message we had. Thank you so much, everybody. And it's so nice to get to know you folks this way. And thank you so much. I'm watching the time here. I don't know if suddenly the curtain falls or how it ends, or if we just all smile and wave, or what we're supposed to do here, but like Lizzie at the end of the Waltons, good night, goodbye.
Yeah. Great job, boy. Yeah.
Well, thank you for moderating, Sarah. It was very kind of you.
And
I know you read all our books and everything.
geez, I could have pretended we had no electricity, and that might have, not such a dummy for not turning the lights on. I'm like, oh my, it's getting dark, but I'm glad I mentioned it so that we're having a,
I did think it was eyes at first.
blink, like what's going on? It seems to be getting darker. My computer's going wrong. Okay, it's 8 o'clock, so I guess we just say good night and goodbye.
Good night.